Ethan was the only human at the Galactic Academy, and every day was the same. He woke up early, got ready, and made his way to school, feeling the weight of the stairs from the aliens around him. The school was huge, filled with creatures from all corners of the universe. Some had scales, others had wings, and some had multiple eyes or tentacles. They all looked strange and powerful, each one better than him in some way. Ethan always felt small. As he walked down the long hallways of the school, he could hear the whispers and see the sneers. "Look, it's the human," one alien would say, laughing with their friends. "Do you think he'll survive the test today?" Another would snicker. Ethan kept his head down, trying not to hear them. He knew what they thought of him: weak, fragile, and inferior. He had heard it all before. Ethan was smart. He had always been good at studying, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't change the fact that he was human. And being human in a school full of powerful aliens was like being the last person picked for the team, every single day. He wasn't tall or strong like the aliens. He didn't have strange powers or sharp claws. His body was just like any other human, normal, ordinary. Most days, Ethan felt invisible. He would sit in the back of the class, trying not to draw attention to himself. His classmates, alien and otherwise, would make fun of him when the teacher wasn't looking. They would throw paper balls at his head or push him into the lockers when he passed by. They didn't take him seriously, but Ethan never fought back. He had learned to keep quiet and keep his head down. Fighting would only make it worse. In the cafeteria, it was the same story. While the aliens ate together in their big groups, laughing and talking in their strange languages, Ethan would sit by himself. He would poke at his food, barely eating, wishing he could just disappear. No one ever sat with him. No one ever asked him to join them. Every lunch felt like a reminder of how alone he was. One day, as Ethan walked to his seat in the cafeteria, a group of alien students blocked his way. The leader of the group, a tall alien with shimmering blue skin named Krull, grinned at him. "Well, look who it is. The lonely human," Krull said, his voice full of mockery. His friends laughed along with him. Ethan's face turned red, but he didn't say anything. He just tried to move past them, but Krull stepped in his way again. "What's wrong, little human? Afraid we're going to hurt your fragile feelings?" Krull's friends laughed louder. Ethan swallowed, trying to keep his emotions in check. He had heard worse. They said things like this to him every day. He didn't want to get into trouble, so he just tried to walk around Krull, but the alien stepped in front of him once more. "You're pathetic," Krull said, sneering. "I don't know why they even let you in here. You'll never be one of us." Ethan's heart sank. He knew Krull was right. No matter how hard he tried, he would never be like them. He would always be the weak, insignificant human. But even as Krull and his friends laughed, something inside Ethan stirred. He felt a small spark of anger, but he quickly pushed it down. Anger wouldn't help. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "You're not weak. You don't have to be like them. You can prove them wrong." Ethan didn't know where the thought came from. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a regular student, trying to survive in a school full of strange and powerful beings. But something about that moment made him feel different, like there was something hidden inside of him that he hadn't discovered yet. When he finally sat down alone at his table, his hands trembled. He was tired of feeling weak. He was tired of being the joke. Maybe one day, Ethan thought, they'll see what humans are really capable of. He didn't know how, but something in him was starting to change. He couldn't let the aliens treat him like this forever. He was going to find a way to show them that humans were more than they thought. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, and Ethan stood up. He walked out of the cafeteria with his head held high, even though the whispers and laughter followed him. One day, he thought again, they'll see. I'll make sure of it. The day of the test arrived, and Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just any test. It was the most important one of the year. The Galactic Academy was holding its annual competition to find the strongest, smartest, and most talented student across the entire school. The winner would receive a special prize, something that could change their life forever. Ethan didn't care about the prize. All he cared about was surviving. As the students gathered in the grand hall, Ethan stood in the back, trying to stay out of sight. All around him, aliens of different shapes and sizes buzzed with excitement. Some had sharp claws, others had wings, and a few even had extra limbs. They looked powerful, ready for the challenge. Ethan felt like a tiny speck among them, invisible and unimportant. "You ready to fail, human?" Krell's voice broke through the crowd. Ethan turned to see him smirking, surrounded by his usual gang of alien bullies. Ethan clenched his fists but didn't say anything. He had learned long ago that arguing with Krell only made things worse. "I'll show you," Ethan muttered under his breath, though he wasn't sure what exactly he was going to show them. The test began, and Ethan took his seat. The first challenge was a physical strength test. The students had to lift heavy rocks and place them into giant containers. The rocks were huge, some of them weighing over 10 times Ethan's body weight. The aliens seemed to handle it with ease. One after another, they lifted the rocks, their muscles rippling with power. Ethan stood at the back, staring at the massive stone in front of him. He knew he wasn't strong enough to lift it, and the thought of even trying made his stomach turn. He glanced at Krell, who was already lifting rocks like they were made of paper. The bullies laughed, knowing Ethan would never be able to do it. When it was Ethan's turn, he hesitated. The other students were already moving on to the next round, but Ethan was still standing there, staring at the rock in front of him. He took a deep breath, telling himself to at least try. With all his might, he bent down, gripping the rock with both hands. For a moment, nothing happened. The rock didn't move. The crowd began to laugh, just as Ethan expected. But then, something strange happened. He felt a sudden rush of energy deep inside him. It wasn't strength. It was something else, something he couldn't explain. His hands tightened around the rock, and this time, it budged. Slowly at first, but then faster and faster. Before he knew it, Ethan had lifted the rock completely off the ground. The crowd fell silent. He wasn't sure how he had done it, but the stone was in his hands, and it felt strangely light. Ethan took a deep breath, heart racing. The aliens around him stared in shock. Krell's mouth hung open, his smug grin gone. "I did it," Ethan whispered to himself. He had actually done it. But before he could fully process what had just happened, the next test began. This time, it was a mental challenge. The students had to solve a series of complex puzzles. The puzzles were designed to test the aliens' intelligence, and Ethan knew he would be at a huge disadvantage. He had seen how fast the aliens could think, and how easily they solved problems that humans couldn't even begin to understand. Ethan took his seat at one of the tables, trying to ignore the alien students who were already whispering behind his back. He looked at the first puzzle, a series of glowing symbols that needed to be arranged in a specific order. The others were already scribbling down their answers, but Ethan stared at the symbols, unsure of where to begin. Then, something unexpected happened. As he studied the symbols, a pattern began to form in his mind. It wasn't like anything he had learned in school. It was as if his mind was suddenly working faster than ever before, connecting the dots in ways that didn't make sense. The answers seemed to appear out of nowhere. He quickly filled in the puzzle. The rest of the class was still working on their puzzles when Ethan finished. He looked up, surprised by how easy it had seemed. For the first time, he felt like he was ahead, like he had an advantage. But the real shock came when the results were announced. Ethan had scored higher than most of the top students, even beating Krell. He could hardly believe it. The aliens looked at him in disbelief, some even muttering to each other. They couldn't understand how a human could perform so well. As the test continued, Ethan felt a strange energy inside him, growing stronger with every challenge. He wasn't sure what was happening, but it felt like something had awakened inside of him, something powerful. He didn't know if it was the result of his hard work or something deeper, but for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he wasn't just a weak human. He had something that no alien could understand. The test wasn't over yet, but Ethan could already feel the shift. The other students now saw him in a new light. The bullies were no longer laughing. Instead, they were watching him closely, unsure of what to make of this human who was doing so well. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel alone. He wasn't just the lonely human anymore. He was a competitor. And this was only the beginning. The tests were getting harder, and Ethan could feel the pressure building up. The first 2 rounds had gone better than he ever imagined, but he knew the hardest part was still ahead. The aliens around him seemed confident, but Ethan still felt like an outsider. He had no idea how he'd done so well so far. It was like something inside him had awakened, but he couldn't understand what it was. The power he felt wasn't like anything he'd learned in school, and he had no idea how to control it. The next challenge was a battle simulation. The students had to face a series of robotic enemies, each one stronger than the last. The goal was simple: defeat the robots before time ran out. But for Ethan, it wasn't that simple. He had never fought before, especially not against machines designed to be nearly impossible to beat. He looked at the other students, aliens who had trained for years, and he felt that old familiar fear creeping back. When his turn came, Ethan stepped into the simulation room, his heart pounding in his chest. The door slammed shut behind him, and the lights flickered on. The first robot appeared in front of him, towering and metallic. It had glowing red eyes and sharp, jagged arms. The other students watched from the observation room, whispering and laughing as they waited for Ethan to fail. Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing. He had no training, no idea how to fight this thing. The robot moved toward him with a loud mechanical whir. Panic rose in his chest, but just as the robot reached out to grab him, something inside Ethan snapped. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. A rush of energy, stronger than anything he had ever felt, surged through him. His heart raced as his body seemed to move on its own, faster than he could think. Without realizing it, Ethan dodged the robot's grab and leaped to the side. The robot swung its arm at him, but Ethan was already behind it, moving faster than the machine could react. He kicked out with all his strength, sending the robot stumbling back. The students watching gasped. They had never seen anyone move that fast. Ethan didn't have time to think. The robot was already recovering, its eyes glowing brighter. It lunged toward him again, but this time, Ethan was ready. He raised his hand instinctively, and to his shock, a burst of energy shot out from his palm, hitting the robot square in the chest. The robot screeched as sparks flew, and in one final move, Ethan shoved it to the ground. The robot lay still, defeated. The room fell silent. The other students stared at him, wide-eyed, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, his mind racing. He had done it. He had actually beaten the robot. But how? He had no idea where the strength had come from. It wasn't just physical strength. It felt like something deeper, something hidden inside him. The next robot appeared, larger and faster than the last. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but this time he was ready. The rush of power surged through him again, and he barely had time to think before he was moving. The robot swung its arms at him, but Ethan was too quick. He ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the attack. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent another blast of energy at the robot, knocking it off its feet. The aliens watching from the observation room were in complete shock. They had seen the other students struggle with the robots, but Ethan was handling them with ease. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Even Krill, who had always been the top student, was staring at him with wide eyes. This wasn't normal. No human should be able to do this. Ethan's body moved without thinking, his mind working in overdrive. The next few robots fell just as easily. their metal bodies crashing to the ground one by one. Each time Ethan defeated one, the power inside him grew stronger. It was like a switch had been flipped, and now he couldn't stop. He was faster, stronger, and more powerful than he had ever felt. Finally, the last robot appeared. It was the biggest, most dangerous one yet. It had weapons attached to its arms and a heavily armored body. The students watching held their breath, knowing this would be Ethan's final test. If he could defeat this robot, he would prove that he was a real threat. If he failed, they would have their answer. Humans weren't special after all. The robot charged at him, its weapons aimed directly at Ethan. He didn't hesitate. The power inside him roared to life, and he dashed forward. The robot fired its weapons, but Ethan moved faster than the blasts. He ducked and weaved, getting closer with every step. Then, in one fluid motion, he leaped into the air and drove his fist straight into the robot's chest. There was a loud crash, and the robot fell to the ground, sparks flying from its body. Ethan stood over it, panting, his heart racing. The simulation ended, and the room was filled with silence. For a moment, no one moved. The aliens were speechless, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Ethan was breathing heavily, his body trembling with the aftershock of the battle. He had done it. He had defeated every robot. But more than that, he had unlocked a power he didn't even understand. The students and teachers stared at him in disbelief. The human, the one they had all laughed at, had just proven that he was more than anyone had ever expected. Ethan stood there, looking around at the stunned faces. He had no idea what had just happened, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just a lonely human. He was something else now, something powerful. After Ethan's shocking victory in the simulation, everything at the Galactic Academy changed. The students who had once ignored him or made fun of him now looked at him with a mix of curiosity and awe. Even Krull, the toughest alien in the school, couldn't bring himself to make fun of Ethan anymore. Instead, he stayed silent, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. How had a human done what he couldn't? The news of Ethan's success spread quickly through the school, reaching the ears of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The leaders of the various alien species were all aware of the competition, but none of them had expected a human to stand out. It wasn't just Ethan's strength or speed that had caught their attention. It was something deeper, something they couldn't explain. The leaders were curious, and curiosity in the galaxy was a dangerous thing. Powerful beings who had ruled the stars for thousands of years didn't often get curious about anything. But Ethan was different, and that made him dangerous. The alien leaders gathered in their private chambers, discussing what had happened at the Galactic Academy. "We need to know more about this human," said Zora, the leader of the Drakari, a race of powerful winged creatures. "Humans are supposed to be weak. They shouldn't be able to do what this one has done. There's something unusual about him." "I agree," said Gorlok, the leader of the Yatari, a species of telepathic aliens with 3 eyes. "His abilities go beyond anything we've seen before. We've observed him in the tests, and there's something about his power. It's not just strength or speed. It's like he has the ability to unlock his true potential in ways we cannot understand." The other leaders nodded, their expressions serious. The idea of a human having abilities that even the most advanced species couldn't explain was unsettling. Humans were supposed to be inferior, easily defeated in battle, and outsmarted in every challenge. But this human, Ethan, was breaking all their rules. "We need to learn more," said Zora. "We cannot allow this to go unnoticed. If humans have this kind of power, it could change everything." The leaders agreed to send a team to the Galactic Academy. They needed to meet Ethan in person, to study him, and to find out what made him so special. If the rumors were true, then Ethan could be a threat to the balance of power in the galaxy. But if they could control him, they could use him to their advantage. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Ethan was still trying to make sense of what had happened to him. His victory in the simulation had been unexpected, and the strange power that had surged through him still confused him. Every day, he felt stronger, faster, and more aware of his surroundings. He couldn't explain it, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't the same as he had been before. The other students were still cautious around him, unsure of how to react. Some looked at him with fear, others with admiration. But Crail, who had once been the top student, now watched Ethan from a distance, no longer the bully, but a student just as curious as the rest. Ethan's life at the academy had changed completely. No longer the lonely human at the back of the class, he was now the center of attention. Everywhere he went, people stared at him, wondering how a human could be so powerful. He tried his best to ignore them, focusing on his studies and training. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. One day, as Ethan was walking to class, he was stopped by a teacher he had never seen before. She was tall, with dark green skin and sharp, angular features that marked her as one of the Venari, a fierce and intelligent species. Her name was Eris, and her presence was commanding. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but firm, "the leaders of the Galactic Academy want to speak with you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The leaders, why would they want to speak with him? He had done well in the tests, but he wasn't that special. At least, he didn't think he was. Before he could respond, Ares turned and motioned for him to follow. Ethan didn't have a choice. He knew he couldn't avoid this meeting, no matter how strange it felt. He followed her through the hallways, past groups of alien students who stared at him with wide eyes. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. The whole academy seemed to be waiting for him to do something. Finally, they arrived at a large private room. Inside, the leaders of the galaxy were waiting. Zora, Gorlok, and the others were all present, sitting around a circular table. They looked at Ethan with intense, curious eyes. "Sit," Zora said, her voice calm but authoritative. Ethan hesitated for a moment before sitting down at the table. He couldn't help but feel nervous. These were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and they were all staring at him. It was like being in front of a group of judges, and he was the one on trial. "You've caused quite a stir, human," Gorlok said, his 3 eyes glowing softly. "You've done things no one expected you to do. Things that defy everything we know about your species." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but Zora raised a hand to stop him. "We're not here to accuse you, Ethan," she said. "We're here to understand you, to learn about your power." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what they were talking about, but he knew one thing: his life at the academy was about to change forever. The days after the meeting with the alien leaders were filled with whispers and tension. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. The leaders had been interested in him, and he couldn't help but wonder what they had in mind. He wasn't just some ordinary student anymore. He was the center of the galaxy's attention. But Ethan's fears turned into reality one morning when he was called to the training arena. The message was short and direct. "Ethan, prepare for a duel." He had no idea who he would be facing. The entire academy buzzed with excitement. Word had spread that the leaders wanted to test him personally. The duel wasn't just any challenge. It was a test of strength, speed, and power. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Who would he be fighting? And more importantly, why? As he walked to the arena, he saw the crowd gathering. The seats were filled with students and teachers, all eager to witness the event. The air was thick with anticipation. Ethan had faced robots, but fighting a real opponent, especially one who was stronger, faster, and more experienced, was something completely different. When he stepped into the arena, Ethan's heart raced. The ground was hard, made of smooth stone that reflected the bright lights overhead. The crowd fell silent as he walked to the center of the arena. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure: this wouldn't be easy. Then the gate on the opposite side of the arena opened, and his opponent stepped into view. Ethan's eyes widened. It was Crawl. Krull, the strongest alien student at the academy, stood there, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes narrowed in focus. He had always been the top dog of the school, the one who was unbeatable. And now, here he was, standing in front of Ethan, ready for a duel. The crowd erupted in whispers. Krull was known for his raw strength and brutal fighting style. Ethan had faced him in class before, but this was different. This was for real. "You ready to lose, human?" Krull sneered, his voice dripping with confidence. Ethan didn't answer. He was still trying to steady his breath, trying to ignore the fear creeping into his chest. He had no idea how he was supposed to defeat Krull. The alien's strength was legendary, and Ethan didn't have the same years of training. But the power that had awakened in him during the tests, could it help him now? The announcer's voice echoed through the arena. "This is the duel of the century. Ethan, the human, versus Krull, the undefeated champion. Only one will walk away victorious." The crowd fell silent again, the excitement palpable in the air. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he squared off against Krull. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The duel started with a loud roar from Krull, who charged forward with incredible speed. Ethan barely had time to react. Krull's fist slammed toward him, and Ethan ducked just in time, feeling the wind from the punch rush past his face. Krull was fast, faster than Ethan had expected. Ethan's instincts kicked in, and he jumped backward, just as Krull swung his fist again. This time, Ethan wasn't quick enough. Krull's fist grazed his side, and Ethan felt the force behind it, a sharp pain shooting through his body. The crowd gasped, but Ethan didn't stop. He pushed through the pain, determined not to give up. The power inside him surged again, stronger than before. His muscles tensed, and suddenly he felt faster, stronger. He dodged another punch from Krull, and this time he struck back. His fist connected with Krull's chest, sending the alien stumbling backward. The crowd gasped in surprise. Ethan had landed a blow on the undefeated champion. Krull growled in anger, wiping his mouth. "You're stronger than I thought, human, but it won't be enough." Krull's eyes flashed with fury as he launched himself at Ethan again, this time with even more force. Ethan barely had time to react. Krull was relentless, and every punch seemed to carry the weight of the galaxy. Ethan felt his body grow heavier with every blow, but he refused to fall. He kept moving, using every bit of strength he had. With a sudden burst of energy, Ethan sidestepped Krull's punch and kicked him in the side, sending the alien crashing to the ground. The crowd was silent, shocked by the turn of events. Krull had been knocked down by a human. Ethan stood over him, panting heavily. His heart was racing, and the energy inside him seemed to pulse in his veins. Krull pushed himself up, his eyes filled with rage. "You're lucky, human," he growled, wiping the dirt from his body. "But luck won't save you for long." The two fighters faced each other again, both bruised and battered. Krull charged once more, but this time, Ethan was ready. As Krull swung a powerful punch, Ethan dodged and landed a punch directly to Krull's abdomen. The impact knocked the wind out of Krull, and he collapsed to the ground with a loud thud. The arena was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, the crowd began to erupt in cheers. Ethan had done it. He had beaten Krull. The alien leaders watching from the sidelines exchanged looks of surprise and concern. No one had expected this outcome. Ethan, the human, had defeated the champion. And in doing so, he had proven something no one had ever thought possible. Ethan stood there, breathing heavily, his body sore from the fight. He had done it, but the victory felt strange. He had won, but at what cost? What did this new power mean? And what would happen next? The announcer's voice rang out again. "The winner of the duel of the century is Ethan, the human." The crowd erupted in applause, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was just the beginning. Something bigger was coming. Something that would change everything. The day after his shocking victory in the duel of the century, Ethan felt like he was walking through a dream. The whole academy seemed to be buzzing with excitement. Students and teachers alike whispered about him in the halls, and even Croyle, the previous champion, avoided looking him in the eye. Ethan had done the impossible. He had defeated Krull, the strongest alien fighter, in front of everyone. But despite all the attention, Ethan didn't feel like a hero. The fight had been intense, and although he had won, his body was sore and tired. He wasn't used to this kind of strength. The power that had surged through him during the fight still confused him. It wasn't something he had ever learned or trained for. It just happened, and it kept happening. Every day, he felt stronger, faster, more in control of his own body. Ethan wasn't the only one who noticed the changes. The alien leaders who had been watching his every move were more curious than ever. They couldn't understand how a human, someone they had always considered weak and fragile, could possess such power. The more they observed him, the more questions they had. What was it that made humans so strong? Was it just Ethan, or was there something about humans in general that no one had discovered before? The leaders decided it was time to do more than just watch. They had to test the limits of Ethan's power. They needed to know if what they had seen so far was a fluke, or if humans truly were stronger than anyone had ever known. One morning, Ethan received a message. "You are to meet with the leaders in the main hall at noon." It was a direct order from the head of the academy. Ethan knew what that meant. The leaders wanted another test. When he entered the grand hall, the leaders were already waiting. Zora, the Drakari leader, was there, her sharp eyes focused on him. Gorlok, the Yeteri leader, sat beside her, his 3 eyes glinting with interest. The other leaders were also present, all looking at him with curiosity and anticipation. "You've proven yourself in the duel of the century, human," Zora began. "But we need to know if your strength is an exception, or if all humans are like you. If you are the only one, then your power will be of little use to us. But if humans are truly this strong, well, that changes everything." Ethan stood before them, unsure of what to say. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be part of some grand experiment, but he had no choice. These were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and they could make his life much easier or much harder. "Are you ready for another challenge?" Gorlok asked, his voice deep and serious. Ethan nodded, still feeling uneasy. "What's the challenge?" Zora smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "We have prepared a series of tests. They will push you to your limits. If you can pass them, we will have our answer." Before Ethan could respond, a door opened, and a group of alien warriors entered the hall. They were all different species, each one stronger and faster than any ordinary creature. These were the galaxy's best fighters, beings who had honed their skills for centuries. They were here to face Ethan, to test him like never before. "You will face them in a series of battles," Zora announced. "Defeat them, and we will know that humans are truly something special. Fail, and we will know that your victory was just a lucky accident." Ethan's heart raced. He had never faced warriors like these. They were fast, strong, and skilled beyond anything he had ever seen. But there was something inside him, a feeling that had been growing stronger every day, that told him he could do this. He didn't know why he was so sure, but he had to believe it. This wasn't just about proving himself anymore. It was about showing the galaxy what humans were really capable of. The first warrior stepped forward. A tall, muscular alien with reptilian skin and a long tail. It hissed as it bared its teeth, its eyes glowing with a dangerous light. It was faster than anything Ethan had fought before, but Ethan was ready. He had learned from his previous battles, and this time, he was prepared. The battle began with the alien charging at Ethan, its claws aimed for his chest. But Ethan dodged, moving quicker than the alien had expected. He countered with a punch that hit the alien square in the stomach, sending it stumbling backward. The crowd of leaders gasped. This wasn't supposed to be possible. The alien tried to recover, but Ethan was already on him, landing blow after blow with speed and precision. Within moments, the alien warrior fell to the ground, defeated. The leaders stared in shock. This wasn't a fluke. Ethan wasn't just lucky. He was truly stronger than they had ever imagined. The second warrior stepped forward, a creature covered in hard, armor-like plating. It charged at Ethan with incredible strength. Its powerful fists aimed to crush him. But Ethan didn't hesitate. The power inside him surged again, and he moved faster than ever before. He dodged the blows, landing his own attacks on the creature's weak spots. With one final punch, the armored alien collapsed, unable to continue. The leaders were stunned. Ethan had defeated two of the galaxy's strongest warriors in a matter of minutes. It was clear now. Humans were stronger than anyone had ever known. Zora's eyes narrowed. It seems we were wrong about you, human. You are not an exception. You are the beginning of something much bigger. Ethan stood there, breathing heavily, his body aching from the battles. He had won, but he knew this was just the start. The galaxy was changing, and humans were no longer the weak, helpless species they had once been. Ethan had shown them that humans could fight, and they could win. But as the leaders gathered around him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this new power came with a price. The galaxy had seen what humans could do, but would they accept it, or would they try to control it? The days following Ethan's victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. News of a human defeating the galaxy's strongest warriors reached every corner of space. Leaders of other alien species began to take notice. The human race was no longer seen as weak or helpless. They were seen as powerful, capable, and a force to be reckoned with. Ethan stood on the balcony of the academy, watching the stars twinkle in the dark sky. His mind was still racing. He couldn't believe everything that had happened. Just a few weeks ago, he was a student who struggled to fit in. Now he was the one everyone was talking about, the human who had beaten aliens stronger than any fighter he had ever known. His life had changed forever, and he wasn't sure what to do with all this attention. He had never asked for this power. He had never wanted to be a hero. All he wanted was to survive, to prove that he belonged in the academy. But now, everything had changed. Humans were no longer seen as inferior beings. The galaxy had seen what Ethan was capable of, and they were starting to understand that humans might be the strongest species in the universe. Ethan turned when he heard footsteps behind him. He knew who it was before he even saw her. Zora, the Drakari leader, stood there, her tall figure casting a long shadow on the ground. "You've done it, Ethan," she said, her voice a mix of respect and curiosity. "You've shown the galaxy that humans are far stronger than anyone could have imagined. But now the question is, what will you do with this power?" Ethan looked at her, unsure how to answer. What was he supposed to do now? His life had changed so suddenly. "I don't know," he admitted. "I didn't want this. I just wanted to fit in, to be like everyone else." Zora's expression softened. "You may not have wanted this, but it's clear now that the galaxy needs humans. You've proven that you can lead. You've proven that you can fight. The question is, what will you do with the power you have now?" Ethan thought for a long moment. He wasn't sure he had the answer, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't ignore what had happened. He couldn't ignore the new power inside him. He had already changed the galaxy's view of humans, and he couldn't back out now. There was more at stake than just his own future. He was part of something bigger. "I want to help," he said finally. "I want to help humans and aliens work together. If we can come together and stop fighting, we can do something incredible. We can make the galaxy a better place." Zora nodded thoughtfully. "You think that's possible? To unite beings from so many different worlds? It won't be easy. There are species that will never agree to peace." "I know," Ethan replied, determination growing in his chest. "But we have to try. We can't keep fighting forever. There has to be a better way. And if I can use this power to make that happen, I will." Zora studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. She seemed to be considering his words carefully. You're different, Ethan. I can see that. But you should know, there are many who will not welcome this change. There will be those who will see your power as a threat. They will not give up control so easily. I know, Ethan said quietly, but I'm willing to fight for it. Not with fists, but with ideas. With words. With the hope that others will see that we're stronger together. Zora's lips curled into a small smile. You might just be what the galaxy needs. But don't think it will be easy. There are many battles to come. Battles of the mind, not just the body. You'll need allies, and you'll need to prove that you're not just another warrior. You'll need to prove that humanity's true strength lies not in violence, but in unity. Ethan nodded. I understand. And I'm ready for whatever comes next. With that, Zora turned and walked away, leaving Ethan alone once again. He stared out at the stars, feeling a mix of hope and uncertainty. The path ahead wasn't clear, but he knew that he was no longer the same person who had entered the academy months ago. He had a new purpose now, a mission that went beyond himself. Ethan was ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy had in store for him. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he had proven that humans were stronger than anyone had ever known. And now he had to prove that humanity could be something more than just a powerful force. It could be a force for peace, for understanding, and for change. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. Now, with Ethan leading the way, it was time to show the universe what humans were truly capable of. It was a new beginning, for him, for humanity, and for the entire galaxy.